Hello and welcome to the WSA 2021 Connect for Impact in Africa, where we have a very, very exciting interactive discussion for everybody today. It's an amazing setup. And my name is Tomi Davies. I am the founding president of the Africa Business Angel Network, and I'm also the chief investment officer for Green Tech Capital Partners in Frankfurt, Germany. Today, we're going to be talking about success stories in Africa that really have impact. People that are actually making a difference on the continent. And to start us off, I will get you to hear from Francis Obirikororang, who is the founder of Agrocenta and actually won the WSA award in 2017. So without getting in the way, over to you, Francis. Tell us what's been happening. How are you doing? Over to you. Francis, you need to unmute you. Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. Hi, Tomi. Hi, everyone. Good morning from around the world. I bring you greetings from Accra, Ghana. About 3 years ago, I think I was preparing to jet off to Vienna, Austria, for the World Summit Awards. We were shortlisted for one of the categories, environmental impact, where we're looking at. So myself and I think one other startup from Ghana, we left Accra and then we got to Vienna, Austria. We were part of the team that had won. It was an exciting experience. What we learned at Vienna, when we came back to Ghana, I think we've made remarkable progress in terms of working with smallholder farmers. I'll give you a little background of Agrocenta, how we started. Sorry. In 2016, we were, myself and my co-founder, Michael, were looking at how do we move into the agricultural value chain to create value for smallholder farmers. Prior to that, we worked in several companies. One was an agricultural technology company also. So we exposed us to some of the key challenges smallholder farmers were facing when it came to production. One of the critical issues with farmers was getting access to a ready market to be able to sell their commodities. So we find out that in Ghana alone, year in, year out, farmers were losing close to $250 million of potential income through some of this exploitative buying. So what the farmers did was, because they could not access a market, they ended up selling to the middlemen who usually would buy the commodity at sometimes 40% below what the market price offered. The farmers were losing a lot of income. It affected their livelihood. So some of the farmers still remained poor. The farmers could not even reinvest into their farms, and the farmers could not even take care of their families. So you find that their wards could not even attend school. Then came in Agrocenta, where we thought, okay, why don't we create a platform that will connect smallholder farmers to the businesses? On the other hand, also on the demand side, also there were big businesses who were looking for raw materials. So I'm talking of companies such as FMCG, companies such as Diageo, Nestle, Olam, etc., who were looking for local raw materials for production. But the problem with them was they could not touch base with these thousands and thousands of smallholder farmers. So what they did was mainly they had to import. They would contract one large-scale commercial farmer in, let's say, South Africa or even Europe or Asia to bring them the raw materials. This also affected, one, it was very expensive, two, it was time-consuming, and three, also it affected the local farmers. So we decided to bridge the gap between smallholder farmers and then the businesses who need the raw materials. It's been an amazing journey so far. Last year, so we started off with, currently on the platform, we have close to about 100,000 smallholder farmers who we've effectively been able to connect to this big institution to sell. Averagely, before the farmers joined Agrocenta, most of the farmers were making under $1 a day. And now I can say, based on even on the impact statistics we have, the farmers are between $2.5 to $3 a day. The target for us is to be able to hit about $4 to $4.5 a day. What we are trying to do is to also to eliminate the zero poverty based on the UN SDGs for smallholder farmers. Based on the activities that we've done, we've noticed that Farmers also need access to credit. You find out that even though you were enabling the trade for the farmers were still not financially strong to be able to expand their farm. So a farmer will own typically, let's say, about 10 acres, but then he's cultivating just about 2 acres. Then came in the second platform, what we call AgroPay within Agrocenta, which exposes the farmers to financial services. That hinges on 4 key services. One was a mobile payments. What we did was we've been able to have partnership with all 3 of the major telecommunications companies in Ghana, MTN, Vodafone, and then Airtel Tigo, to be able to enable mobile digital payment for smallholder farmers. Why digital payments? Once farmers are unable to receive digital payments, we're able to build some form of financial identity for these smallholder farmers. That makes them eligible to access loans from financial institutions. On the same platform, we have access to microloans. We've partnered with 3 large banks in Ghana who are providing microcredits to smallholder farmers. Farmers can now access between $100 to $500 of input financing alone. So they can buy seeds, they can buy fertilizers, farmers can get access to tractor services. On the same access to financial services, we introduced the crop insurance. Ideally, agriculture is very risky, ideally, because most of the farmers rely on rain-fed agriculture. You find that if anything happens, drought, fire, how is the farm insured against some of these eventualities? Then the last bit, which is very exciting to us, is how do we let farmers see that agriculture is a business, not just a means to an end? So how do we, in the formal sector, if you work in a company and you are, let's say, 60 years, you go on pensions, and you find out that you have access to some pension benefits. That doesn't exist in the agricultural sector. Farmers will labor for 10, 15, 20 years. When they're about 60, 70 years, they do not have any form of financial resources. Then they become a burden on their family. So we've introduced the pensions policy within the agricultural space, where we partner with third-party pensions companies who underwrite pensions for smallholder farmers. So now farmers can lay away some funds, $50, $100, $200 annually. After 5 years, the farmer is eligible to get access to pension benefits. These are some of the impact stories we've created for smallholder farmers across the country. The journey it hasn't been easy. The whole agricultural value chain is highly unstructured. We're looking at creating a platform that will serve the entire sub-Saharan Africa and expose not less than 5 million smallholder farmers to digital services. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for that, Francis. I can't wait to find out what you do next. I like the AgroPay concept. We really should look at doing this more across the continent. Well, now for the exciting part. Ladies and gentlemen, I've got an amazing panel with me today. And really, it's more about what they're going to be saying to us and what we're going to be discussing. But let me tell you who's here first. We've got Kingsley Iweka, the WSA Youth Ambassador, and 2016 actually won the Digital Awards for WSA. My friend Jan Schwaab is here with us, who is the head of digital transformation for GIZ. He's done amazing projects on the continent. We've got Monica Nthiga, who's with the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap in Kenya. Arsene Tungali is here with us, WSA expert in DRC, Congo. We've got Agang, Ditlhogo, who's the co-founder of, guess what, the clicking generation in Botswana. And finally, we left the best to last. We've got the Director General, of Smart Africa here with us, Lacina Koné. Mr. Koné, Agang, Arsene, Monica, Jan, and Kingsley, you're all welcome. Now, here's the topic. We've got a lot of things happening on impact on the continent. We've got different policies we're seeing that have an impact. We've got different types of challenges. You just heard from Agrocenta some of the challenges he's having with smallholder farmers. However, we've also seen the rise, for example, of fintech on the continent. In Nigeria, where I come from, last year, Stripe bought Paystack for $200 million. And just a few weeks ago, a company, Flutterwave, raised $170 million, making it a unicorn in the fintech area. We've heard about agri-tech. We know there's a lot going on with renewables. It'll be interesting to hear thoughts from each of you about what you're seeing as the challenges, and probably for me, more importantly, how do entrepreneurs overcome this, and how can we help? So without much ado, Kingsley, I'm going to start with you.
Good morning, Mr. Tomi Davies. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I think I was having a bit of technical issues with Microsoft Teams. I had to switch devices. My video should come up shortly. Otherwise, I could just go ahead to speak without the video, if that's fine.
Well, the video clicked in and it went back out, but please go ahead.
Okay, yes. So sorry, the question again is...
Well, I just want to hear what you're seeing. You know, what exactly are you seeing in this space? Okay, I mean, what are the challenges and the needs that you're seeing entrepreneurs have, especially those that are focused on high impact ventures, such as we heard from Agrocenta, the stuff you were doing in digital transformation. What are the challenges? What can be done? How can we help?
Okay, so by virtue of the nature of the work that I do, which is propagating positive changing realities on the African continent, a lot of times, you know, the majority of what I track is actually success stories. Of course, entrepreneurs face a lot of challenges, but like you mentioned, you know, the success stories that we've been seeing recently with Flutterwave, with Paystack, you know, I think that what we have is the basis for a lot of inspiration for a lot of entrepreneurs to sort of explore what possibilities there are, right? Whilst also recognizing the challenges that they might, you know, encounter along the journey. I think that one of the things that I've heard a couple of people mention is, you know, with finding the right people to work with, you know, so recruiting the right team or finding the right partners to work with. I think that's one of the major challenges that a lot of entrepreneurs face in this part of the world. You know, but I think that, again, as it is with the entrepreneur's journey, there's some startups, entrepreneurs who are also looking to close that gap, you know, with, to mention a few, you have Talent QL, you know, and some other initiatives that have come up across the continent who are looking to enable entrepreneurs find the right partners, find the right teams to work with. You know, so this is just my thoughts on the matter.
Okay, very interesting. Thanks a lot for sharing that. Jan, I think I have the right to call you German African because you've had more impact on the continent with your projects than most people I know. It'd be interesting to hear from you what you're cooking up, what challenges you foresee, and how organizations like WSA and those that are partnering with WSA can actually complement the work you're doing.
Tomi, thanks a lot for that question, but also pointing the most difficult question at me. Yes, well, we've been active on the African continent now with this Make IT initiative for about 5 years. And we've done some experience and we saw that we also made some impact. But as you know, GIZ is a implementing agency that looks at things more from a, let's say, a systematic perspective. So we do not invest directly into individual startups, but we rather look at the system. So what is the ecosystem in which startups can grow up and scale after some time? And from that experience from the last years, we see on one hand, we have the typical business challenges, like access to finance, markets, knowledge, all the things that Francis also described very well. Here it is important to collaborate, I think, with all the different market partners. And there's a lot to do, and many things are happening on the ground, and this is what I very much appreciate. But if we look at it, let's say, from a more general perspective, then also other topics come into perspective where I see there are big challenges. One is the ecosystems as such. They are there, but they are still weak, and they are mostly focused on big cities like Nairobi, Lagos, now other cities following up, but still there's so much to do. You have good entrepreneurs all over Africa, but how many of them do really get access to a good ecosystem where they can be inspired and further continue with their innovation? A second big challenge from our perspective is, and this is the legal frameworks. Here, Smart Africa is doing amazing work, and I'm sure Lacina will talk about this later on. And we definitely have to speed up these processes in order to give entrepreneurs a good background, because what is a good innovation in the long run if it does not fall on a, let's say, fertile ground? And one thing we should not forget is still the narrative about Africa. We've been very active in the last years in trying to change this narrative. If you look at the news in the United States or in Europe connected with Africa, then in many cases you still have all the topics like migration, crisis, conflicts and disaster, but not so much the narrative about Africa as a continent full of opportunities. We have been working on changing this, and we see the good effect, like series like Digital Innovation Made in Africa, all the work the World Summit Award is doing here in changing this narrative. Because once you create a narrative where innovation from Africa is visible on a world level, then you will quickly recognize that the innovation is also on top level, if you look at this from the business perspective. And this attracts business partners to the continent, but still there's a lot of work here to be done on the narrative level. Perhaps so much for a start.
Thanks a lot for that, Jan. Quite a lot, you know. Very, 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 very fascinating. Jan touched on quite a number of things, Monica, and it'll be interesting, you know, to get your perspective on what you're seeing as the challenges that the impact-driven organizations specifically are facing, given what you're doing, the work you're doing, and any suggestions, recommendations, or solution sets that you think we can bring to bear.
Thank you. So to provide context, I come from the non-profit sector, and specifically looking at digital technology through open source software as well as open data. So to build on the challenges and development specifically in the non-profit space, and looking at East Africa, particularly, for example, Kenya and Uganda, we find that between 80 to 90% of total NGO funding is through foreign donor funding. This in itself has some of the challenges because it's largely programmatic funding, which has less flexibility, for example, on capacity building. And when we explore what stands in the gap, for example, in taking, say, a community that's already doing is having great outcomes in their work and being able to shift that trajectory to an impact level or to a large scale level, then we often need to go beyond the funding and offer an investment in the form of human capital or human intellect to kind of bridge that gap. So this in itself is pushing for more innovation on fundraising and funding. We are seeing more of a shift towards, for example, internally generated income. We have a lot of technology hubs, the tech hubs that are coming up, and some of them are tapping into fee for service consultancies, crowdfunding, hiring out event space, but also something else that is largely untapped, or that is maybe I'd say not widely used, is the use of picking out philanthropy or local philanthropy. It's largely an unspoken territory for the region. And I think exploring that could hugely, evolve what partnerships could look like. We're also seeing a push for consortiums that are looking at, beyond monetary support in the form of filling out, gaps that exist. For example, it could be contributions in kind. It could be contribution in terms of, equipment. And not necessarily direct funding. So those are just some of the challenges that we're envisioning, and especially in working with communities. And maybe I could also mention why there is that need for more innovation around that process. It's because the challenges on the demand side are a bit different. So a lot of, say, the communities that an organization like the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team will work with are very much in the early stages of business, or what I'd call informal businesses. So they're not formally registered. They do not meet, the critical mandatory requirements of operating a business within their space. And what this means is that they often need that wider ecosystem in order to continue to thrive, whether it's through funds channeled through another organization, whether it's through getting kind of capacity support on how to run the business. And they also tend to kind of lack, the adequate initial skills, because once if I'm starting up something that's, community-led, it's self-mobilized, then the chances of me, having a highly efficient, operations person or a highly efficient project person are close to none. So there's also that, lack of adequate skills to run the businesses. And so a lot of what we should be moving forward to is how do we then bridge those human capital gaps in those instances. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for that, Monica. I'm getting a theme here, which I'm going to come to when everybody's finished. But Arsene, I mean, you've been sort of pacing the digital world, and earlier Jan mentioned the legal framework, which I believe Lacina is going to be talking about when he speaks. But what I'd like to hear from you is sort of from that rights management, especially in the digital world, the challenges you're seeing on the continent and what people can and are doing about it, especially as we increasingly move onto financial platforms that are digital, identity platforms that are digital, and people are creating intellectual property all the time that has significant impact on others. What are your thoughts on the challenges being faced and how they can be overcome?
Yeah, thank you very much, Tomi, and hi everyone. It's really good to be part of this program. And so I'm working on the legal framework and looking into the right and things like that. But today I want to focus on some of the challenges startups in the Congo, in DRC, facing when they try to engage with the local community, but also looking broadly on the global scale. And so first, the DRC is a French-speaking country, and so you can imagine English is not one of our languages, and so just few of us are able to communicate in English. And as you know, most of the investors or business angels are English speakers, which makes them, I don't know whether it's by choice or just they find it to be easy, to reach out to English-speaking countries rather than French-speaking countries. And I would understand, because this gives them, the ability to easily communicate with local entrepreneurs, whereas in French-speaking countries, it's really difficult to engage with them. And this is one of the challenges that local entrepreneurs are facing to, when they're trying to expose themselves to the global platforms. And so many of those business angels or investors that we know of, and you understand that on those lists of I don't know, each X startup that was able to raise I don't know, X millions of dollars, you will not be able to find any French-speaking countries listed, and if there are any, there will be like just probably one out of a number of other initiatives. So language is one of the barriers that many entrepreneurs in the region are facing, and I think that's something that needs to be solved. I don't know who will be solving this, but I just trying to throw it away so that you guys are aware of that as a challenge. But looking at the legal framework as well, I'm closely monitoring the legal framework developments in the country, and as a digital rights activist, I need to look into the way the country is doing to be able to facilitate legally so many of these opportunities that are emerging from the grounds. But the Congolese startup ecosystem is growing, increasingly growing. But one of the other challenges, again, is the uptake from the local community. Because you may have digital solutions, but if the country is still at around less than 20% of internet penetration as of now, you understand that the uptake from the local community will be very low. And so we are again calling up to the government to not only increase initiatives that are helping to increase access to internet in the country, in order to help people to be able to use those digital platforms that are being developed by local entrepreneurs. And so there is an initiative which is the Startup Act, which is under work from different startup actors in the country. I remember when I was in Tunisia with the World Summit Awards as part of the grand jury, we learned about the Startup Act in Tunisia that is already effective and that received a kind of support from different stakeholders. But in the DRC, this is just in the making. Startup and entrepreneurs came together, and I think the GIZ was part of this somehow, to come up with the Startup Act that is now in the making, and they are looking forward to sending it to the ministry, and it's either being supported by the ministry or the parliament in order to oversee this startup ecosystem. Because again, startup is an English word, and so it has to be translated somehow into French so that it means something in French as well to the local community. And so, but lastly, we can, as a World Summit Award experts in the country, I've seen through the process so many initiatives in the fintech sector, even in the education sector, and even the agricultural sector, and the health sector. So many new initiatives that are coming, and so the country is really moving in the digital world, and the entrepreneurs locally are not to be left behind. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Arsene, for that. It's quite interesting hearing about the challenges. And I've always postulated that when you look at the continent, we can't look at Africa as a monolithic whole. And you're highlighting that point right now. It is the fact that whether we love it or hate it, the reality of the African continent is that it does have a colonial legacy. And there are at least 4 Africas that we need to deal with. The first is Arabia, which is North Africa. The second is Francophone Africa, which is primarily centered around West Africa, but as moves to the DRC and definitely beyond. Then we've got Anglophone Africa, which sort of straddles the diamond between Nigeria and Kenya, or east to west, and then you can go Uganda up north. And of course, we've got the Germanic Southern Africa, which also covers Namibia, Botswana, and the like. So these are distinct colorations of the continent that we are also seeing in how entrepreneurs are developing and how they are being funded. So it's going to be very interesting hearing from Agang how she's seeing it from a Botswana perspective, and what the challenges she sees are and what she's suggesting on how to overcome them. Agang, over to you.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
It's so exciting to see all of my old friends, to see the WSA family. So I'd like to just give you perspective of the work that I do so that when I reach the recommendations, you can understand why I'm on this thinking path. So my name is Agang Ditlhogo, and I'm an ICT for development practitioner. I'm a digital advocate. I'm also WSA national expert for Botswana. So thank you so much for this invitation. The social issues that speak to me and that have spoken to me for the past few years has been issues of digital literacy, girls' education, and just improved access for connecting the unconnected to safe, reliable, and affordable internet for all. So this is why I co-founded the Clicking Generation. So at the Clicking Generation, we are very loud, we are very colorful, and we work with kids and teens, just trying to bridge the digital literacy gap. So we offer digital literacy programs, and we have been operating for the past 7 years. So I've been, reimagining education for Africa, especially digital education, and especially for young people in rural areas. And we all know that digital literacy is the new currency. So digital literacy needs to become a reality for these communities. I personally believe that learners and teachers should be, equipped with 21st century skills. So as a Clicking Generation, we don't only offer basic computer skills, we offer coding, robotics, design thinking methods, so that the learners that we work with can eventually contribute to the global digital community. I'm really concerned. It's not only a Botswana issue, but there's a rising number of youth unemployment. Yeah, there's unemployment and underemployment across Africa. So we need to rethink the approach to education, to entrepreneurship and innovation. By asking relevant questions, how can we better equip young Africans to be global players? How can we better encourage them, to compete? How can we contribute to the global technology landscape? How can we offer better health, economic empowerment, and just the overall improved livelihoods for the communities that we are in? So lately, I've been thinking about how are we, as Africa, how are we rebuilding beyond COVID? How are we building back better? How are we building back together beyond this COVID-19 uncertainties? And we need to enhance our mandate personally, as organizations, as the WSA. And I just came up with a few call to action items that we can all think about. So we need digital resourcing. We need for both urban and rural areas, so that we can provide schools, education institutions with technology equipment, reliable broadband internet. Right now I was just talking about how my data is depleting, and I'm just nervous because I might get cut off at any point. So we need internet that is reliable, that will connect the unconnected still. Number two, we need to provide and promote diversity. We need to be inclusive in STEM education by encouraging our girls, to enter into STEM male-dominated fields. Number three, we need to develop partnerships. So I'm glad that WSA is coming together with experts, is coming together with NGOs and GIZ and all of us. We need to develop a multi-stakeholder African alliance, that African alliance that will speak to digital skills and jobs and just promoting and nurturing young people. Number 4, and the last one, is edutech. Edutech stakeholders need to collaborate and partner together. We need to collaborate with government, we need to collaborate with academia and research, NGOs and corporates. So these are just my thoughts around how we can possibly revive Africa, bring the digital digital literacy to a reality, and just improve livelihoods in our community. So I'm happy to connect with everybody. Go to our page on Facebook, The Click in Generation, see the work that we are doing, how we can collaborate, how we can work together. And I'm also on LinkedIn. Thank you so much. I'm done speaking.
Thank you, Agang. Very, very much appreciated. Now, you've raised a very important point. And what you've raised comes around smart cities and smart infrastructure, and having that capacity and the capability to provide reliable internet connections that can then be the supporting infrastructure for the digital literacy foundation that you're talking about. And hopefully, with the right kind of players, get diversity and inclusion into that. And I can't think of a better segue for Mr. Lacina Koné to address us on Smart Africa.
Thank you very much. Thank you. You can all hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Loud and clear.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's really a distinct honor to be part of this Congress. We collectively, listen to all the speakers, participants. We collectively embrace the role of digital innovations in accelerating the progress towards every single one of the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And I firmly believe that Africa, with its various market and different cultures, is indeed a hub for innovation and collaborations. And here's why. Talking about narrative, Africa has shown that it is a hub for innovation and has attracted more interest from investors' perspective in 2020, despite the COVID pandemic crisis. For example, in 2015, African startup raised about 400 million compared to 2 billion that came into the continent in 2019. Moreover, we are seeing actually a very clear rapid growth of hubs, incubators, and accelerators on the continent. As of the last year, 2020, if I recall, Africa has recorded more than 643 tech hubs, with the 41% of these being incubators and 24% innovations hub, 14% accelerator, and 39% offering a co-working space with the purpose of helping each entrepreneur, take their first step towards launching a viable company and to support the growing ecosystem. These numbers indicate that Africa indeed is clearly becoming, if it is not already, a hub for digital innovations through the promotions of a local digital content. However, despite this rapid growth we are seeing in Africa, we are also facing certain challenges that you were talking about that makes us have less unicorn than other continents. And here are some of the African key challenges, per Smart Africa analysis. Lack of funding. Startups in Africa have much fewer options for capital to drive rapid growth, especially in pre-seed and seed phases. For instance, research has shown that the majority of the tech hubs in Africa receive less than $100,000 in funding from various sources, while 62% of hubs have less than 10 paid employee, full-time employee. Impact finances, which directs the capital towards the social and environmental ends, including SDG, has the potential to help address these issues. This is why Smart Africa is developing a network of funds to support African youth and startup. We started with the scholarship funds, as you all know, you may know, to allow Africans to be educated and equipped for ICT startup and innovations. And talking about scholarship, so far we have funded close to 70 to 75 students in a master's degree program for IT. And we recently launched the Block Smart Africa Funds with a partner in Luxembourg, Bamboo Capital, a unique partnership where the governments are taking the lead by investing as a catalyst tranche and joining forces with the private sector to collect about close to $100 million to fund startup starting from the seed stage. Number two of the challenges is really, as our partner GIZ and other participant mentions, it is the lack of harmonized legal framework and policies. African entrepreneurs have long suffered from unfavorable regulatory environment that can make it hard to start, grow, or even scale in an innovative business way. This needs to change. One of the main targets of Smart Africa is that by 2025, 60% of African countries should have a Startup Act or equivalent legal text in place to alleviate that. The enactment of the Startup Act across Africa, it actually will increase the incentive for young people to start a venture, also to put their money into promising startups, and other ecosystem actors also to lend their support where it's needed. As we have done in Smart Africa with Tunisia, as one of the participants was mentioning, Tunisian Startup Act, in Rwanda, for example, Smart Africa is working with other member states of the alliance to support with the process of developing the Startup Act. The last but not the least on the challenges is really the capacity building. The capacity building is arguably the #1 challenge across all sectors in Africa, especially because of our youth. 70% of African population is less than 30 years old. So beside the Smart Africa Scholarship Funds, we have also developed the Smart Africa Digital Academy that we call SADA, which is the Pan-African capacity building platform that allows us not only to empower our policy and decision makers with the required skills and knowledge to develop harmonized policy for a successful digital transformation of the continent, but also to prepare the next generation's African entrepreneur. So in conclusion of all these challenges, the collaboration is crucial for the tech and digital innovation to succeed. It's very, very important. Success of startups require more than resources allocations and more of consolidations and collaborations with the need of more hub alliance, shared program, deeper conversation among stakeholders from all across the continent. Smart Africa support digital innovations and the 17 SDGs by using our network member and partners composed of incubators, accelerators, startups, governments, investors, international companies, and academia to accelerate the digital transformation agenda in Africa. That's my take on that.
Lacina, that was excellent. Thank you very, very much for that. Wow, that's a lot to take in. The growth of hubs, yes, and the disparity of funding a pre-seed to seed, and the work that Smart Africa is doing, from working with Bamboo on the fund through to harmonizing legal frameworks, and the capacity development academy are all very, very laudable. But I have a bone to pick with you, and that is I have not heard made mention of my group of people across the continent, which are the local angel investors that actually help startups succeed at that pre-seed stage that you're saying there's a dearth of funding. I personally believe we're missing a trick by not empowering local investors to invest in intellectual property. They're familiar with real property. They're investors in infrastructure. They're investors in trade. And I personally have been on a mission for the last 5 years, putting networks in 33 African countries, 50 of them to be precise, where we're educating local investors on the possibilities and opportunities that entrepreneurship brings to them, especially in the digital world. And the reason I bring it up is I don't think we have a leg to stand on going around the world asking investors to come join us to invest on the continent when we are not developing our local investors exactly the same way we're developing the entrepreneurs. So that, I think, is a food for thought and a challenge to Smart Africa by the Africa Business Angel Network directly on that key point that everybody has raised, which is partnerships and collaboration. Every single member of the panel says we do need to build an ecosystem. We need to collaborate. I quite like the fact that Jan talked on the fact that we need to change the African narrative as perceptions abroad are still about an Africa in crisis, about an Africa in migration, not one that is creating, albeit the starting of unicorns and creating entrepreneurship and building people like Agrocenta, having, people doing the kind of work Agang is doing, what Monica's doing. You've heard from Arsene and DRC. These are the stories that need to be told, in my opinion. So I think that was really, really fascinating listening to the first round from the panelists. Hopefully we can get just about a minute each, a minute from each of you as we round up, because I'd really, really love for us to hear from our dear friend, the Honorable Minister for ICT in Rwanda, who is here with us and has graciously been listening as we have discussed this. But before she closes our session, this time I'm going to go straight back to you, Lacina, because I would like you to respond to what I've said. But probably more importantly, we've all talked about three critical things: collaboration, the need to develop capital. I use the word capital because we all talked about two forms of capital. We talked about human capital, whether it is digital literacy, capacity development, and we use different languages, but that is human capital development. And the third and final is financial capital. Okay, access to capital is lacking, is a recurring theme. So please, could you, each of you, sort of touch on those three things for me? Starting with you, Lacina, over to you. You have to unmute. Please unmute.
Okay. Thank you very much for your observations on the Africa Business Angels. That also must be taken into account, and the different observations, positive observations you've actually talked about. True, it's very true in the ecosystem on the value chain. We must be also targeting the angels, investors in Africa. This is exactly how Silicon Valley and so on and so forth were actually created in the beginning, if you remember, we all remember. However, it's very important to know that in the African context, as part of the social contract, the population must trust the government. They must trust the governments for many reasons, particularly in the investing in the technology. If you remember, depending, I think you're based in Nigeria, in West Africa here, the agro business started a while back, and you know that, of course, there is a lot of scam coming from a different angel investor. You know what I'm talking about. I can see you laughing. The governments, most of the government or many governments do not have a vehicle as a sign that it trusts its entrepreneur, it can invest in the future of the young people. The Smart Africa Block Funds, it's blended financing from the private and the public sector, 70%, 30% from the public, 70% from the private sector. So that 70% private sector, indeed, it is not only targeting international private as such, but also even African private investor to be able to invest. When the private sector say that the government has a vehicle and is investing its own people, that's the only way it will actually reinforce the trust in the private business into the government to come ahead. We do not want to we don't want to have a vehicle. I see you laughing. We did not want to have, okay, we are opening the angel investor, but in reality, our governments are not really implicated. In the Smart Africa funds, it is the vehicle that the governments are involved in the investment in the future of the entrepreneur together as a blended financing from the private sector. I hope that clarified. And when I say private sector, it's not just international private sector. We're talking about our local homegrown angel investors as well.
Thank you very much for that, Lacina. And you talked about digital literacy and internet access as critical components of this. Do you want to sort of spend a minute on exactly, for example, Lacina has talked about the amazing work Smart Africa is doing, which I think, if you look at what he's talking about, the academy is starting to address that. If you look at the way he structured the fund, it's starting to address that. I know infrastructure is the big challenge. How do you see that being solved? You have a minute.
Yes. So it's very easy. Less talk and more action. Let's be very intentional within our efforts as individuals. It starts with the individual, with the community, and it goes to the government. If we are going to be talking about curriculum development, let's talk and then implement. So let's just be intentional and be genuine for the young ones, because as we change the narrative, we need to action it out. So that's just me. Let's talk, more action.
Okay. Thank you very, very much for that. Arsene, it's a tough one, the language challenge. And I think it's one that is going to get interesting as we start to see increased Chinese investment on the continent, whether the Chinese will go into Francophone or they stay with everybody in Anglophone, etc. And there are other complexities that add a layer to the DRC challenge. What are the solutions that you're seeing being put in place to resolve this? Is it French funding that is increasing? Is it English language that's been taught in schools? You have a minute.
Well, I think this is to me, right?
Yes, it is.
So language will always be an issue, but I think sending everyone to school will take us a decade at least. But maybe if they can use solutions such as interpreters or translators or things like that, I think it can make things easy. I spoke about languages because I run a company which is language services and we've been supporting organizations and actors who are trying, to penetrate the market in the DRC, trying to help them with their language issues. And so I don't know whether that can be one of the avenues to look for local interpreters to help them, discuss or engage with the local entrepreneurs on the markets. I think that will be one of the things. But also, they should not consider a country as a French-speaking country and just say, well, probably we won't be able to fund entrepreneurs who are English speakers. There are entrepreneurs who are English speakers in the DRC, and there are actually a handful of them. And so if they can also just make sure they don't focus on the English-speaking countries and also choose French-speaking countries and reach out to those with whom they'll be able to communicate. And if they can't communicate with them, then use the services of other interpreters or translators to be able to help them communicate easily with the community. I think you also mentioned what should the governments do in some ways. Our country, the DRC. I'm happy we have Mr. Koné from Smart Africa, and I believe the DRC is part of the alliance, right? Wonderful. And so I don't know whether I can ask him a question, but I wanted to also understand.
Please go ahead. That's what the panel is for.
Wonderful. So I also want to know more about what, in terms of interaction, how far are you with the DRC in terms of engaging the governments into supporting the local digital innovation ecosystem in the country?
Okay, I'll skip protocol, and Lacina, I'll let you answer that question. I was going to save all the Q&As till last, but I think that's too important a question to dodge. And it's a quick answer anyway.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, DRC is a part of the Smart Africa Alliance. In fact, it came right on the time because I am planning by the end of next week to be in DRC. I do have a minute. Yes, I have a meeting with the regulator and the minister. The DRC is on our top list this year to accelerate, to push actually the Startup Act in the DRC, because it's a big country, as we've done it with other countries in Senegal, Mali, and so on and so forth, for the legislation for the Startup Act to be passed. And those talks are actually on the agenda with the minister, among others, on the digital transformation area. So I'm hoping, by the end of the first week of April to be in DRC for a meeting. And hopefully I will be able to meet you there.
There you go.
Yeah, wonderful. I think, we just keep in touch. And I'm not in Kinshasa, but I assume you'll be going to Kinshasa. I'm in Goma. So, but anyways, we can keep communicating, and I'm happy to support your visits somehow.
Okay.
Hey,
thank you.
One connection made on the panel. How's that for progress? So there's collaboration in the making, and partnership in the making right here live. You saw it on WSA. Okay, and that's a good one, Monica, because you were talking about innovative approaches that the hubs are using for self-reliance, because Lacina talked about 640 odd hubs. And you brought up an interesting fact about them starting to look at crowdfunding and other avenues to actually develop the startups they have on their control. Do you want to speak more about other solutions like that you see that could probably help others around here?
Yes. So the ecosystem within the region, the first thing maybe is to probably speak to the position that the tech hubs actually hold, and the fact that most of them are operating in this space where we call, like, you're in between a corporate office and a community space. And so that in itself is really a good avenue that puts the tech hubs at an advantage in terms of being able to advance kind of creative ways through which they can bring together different investors or different people to chart a way forward. So the reason why I brought up the tech hub was really because of the innovative way in which they are set up, the accessibility, the open spaces, the ability to convene so many different events that bring different conversations together. And another probably factor that I could mention is tied to the fact that some of the challenges that we're experiencing around access to funding for organizations and communities in this region are actually perpetuated by very many factors and not just one thing. So an example would be the different tiers to actually accessing funding. Is not, it goes beyond, for example, whether I'm able to see a call for applications into what spaces are some of these conversations around, say, the next round of funding happening. When are they happening? We all know it's typically outside, of the 8 to 5, work hours. And you find that for such organizations, being in these spaces, being in these conversations actually helps or creates an upper hand at networking. So probably the other innovative or way that I could mention is probably to also challenge the startups, the community organizations to actually take part in challenging some of these processes that are already in place. And I'll give, for example, I'll give an example of I've been in an environment where even when there is, say, an act or a policy that's being challenged in Parliament or that's being debated, and there's an invitation for conversation for people to kind of challenge the direction that that's likely to take place. Unfortunately, we see less and less representation from the people that would benefit the most from such policies, and it's both infrastructural challenges, it could be social challenges that they're not able to take part. But I think just being intentional in contributing or sitting in such spaces could actually help to break down some of these barriers, the colonialism factors in the different regions. So those are just some of the ways that could help give rise to more innovative ways around navigating the challenges around funding, and also taking advantage of systems and spaces that have been set up to help these organizations navigate some of these challenges.
Thank you very, very much for that. My dear friend Jan, earlier on you talked about a number of things, but I want to sort of drill down a bit more on the African narrative and how we at WSA, people at Smart Africa, and all of those around this table can sort of contribute to making that a positive narrative, one of opportunity, because we all know talent is evenly distributed. It's opportunity, okay, that is scarce, and it'll be interesting to hear from you, how we can start to change, okay, that narrative, starting with the conversation we're having now. What are your thoughts?
Thanks for that question. Perhaps two thoughts in two different directions. One is, we know that still in many African areas, there's still a wide digital gap. It starts with the aforementioned connectivity issues, but also with access to tech hubs and other opportunities for those who do not have the perfect access in the metropolitan areas. So we definitely have to consider these, and in particular where we have entrepreneurship out of necessity. So how do we provide opportunities for these people? And a different road to follow is what we jointly here with some of the group, like Smart Africa, like the African Business Angel Networks and others, have started to think of, is how to go from quality to excellence, to better showcase the innovative aspect of the African continent. And something we tend to forget in many of our technical discussions worldwide, if we talk about the challenges, about the environmental questions and so on, it's not only about making money when we talk about entrepreneurs, but it is also about their spirit and the inspiration they bring and have. and how to maintain this spirit. And here I see a special role in particular. You asked the question, Tomi, what is the special role for the business angels? If I see an institutional setting for maintaining or upgrading the spirit of entrepreneurs, it is the many, many, many business angels and mentors they need and have. They need so much hand-holding along the way from a good idea to a viable business. And opening doors is not only an institutional question, it is a question of personal trust. And how do we create an atmosphere where this trust can grow? This is not by just opening, I don't know, new institutions. It is by providing a setting where trust can be forwarded and shared. And what type of setting do we need for that? And we do an experiment now jointly in the next years, supported by funds from the European Commission. We have now started to establish a consortium, including the African Business Angel, Smart Africa Secretariat, I4Policy, a number of private sector enterprises and other partners, including also the French and the Belgian governments, also to bridge these language issues there. Something we want to create is a, let's say, cluster of innovative partners to help startups in their ecosystems in a smart way, in a trusted way. We call it a system of digital innovation hubs, but do not confuse this with local innovation hubs, but it's more a network centered around individual topics, like what is the next generation of agricultural innovation that we need? We've learned from the Agrocenta example that they go beyond, let's say, a simple farmer app. If you have a simple farmer app, this is good to have. But if we look at the whole market of farmer apps in Africa, I don't know, they skyrocket at the moment with more than 400. But tell me a farmer who wants to install hundreds of apps on his smartphone. So you need this next generation of applications and the next generation of innovation to drive digital change. And this is where we go from quality to excellence. And I expect a lot from this clustering and setting up these digital innovation hubs, because this will help us to create something like a single digital market for different sectors.
So you need this next generation.
Sorry?
The next generation of innovation.
I have an echo now.
Change. And this is where we go from quality to excellence.
And perhaps the last sentence, and these digital innovation hubs, as they create an atmosphere of trust and collaboration, they can also better link to other digital innovation markets across the globe, and also to bring the African innovation more into the global perspective.
Wow.
So much for the theory and hope. But we have to tell this narrative, and we have to go step by step. And if the first step is to have a high quality application on the ground, the next step is to bring this into the trusted environment and then link this environment internationally. And here we need many partners.
I couldn't agree with you more. When we talk about ecosystem architecture, this is exactly what we mean. Because what you're highlighting there is the existence of the innovation value chain, from conceptual model in the research and development of academia through to it being in the hands of the consumers through an entrepreneurship initiative that is backed by government infrastructure and the supporting entrepreneur support organization systems that are in place, including hubs, angels, and professional service providers. Thanks a lot for sharing that. I like the takeaway from quality to excellence. I think that should be the moniker. We should actually do a whole session or an event on that, because it's accepting that we on the continent have reached a certain stage. It's taken 5-10 years, but we're almost guaranteed. I think we've got 600 hubs going to 1,000 innovation hubs across the continent. We, for example, believe at the African Business Angels in the collaboration between angels and innovation hubs. And to speak to Arsene's point, funnily enough, it was the French Development Bank that saw it fit to actually back us okay, to say, hey, if you guys want to do that, here's what we're going to do. If an angel investor invests in a startup that's in an innovation hub, we're actually going to match that investment with a grant to the startup. And by the way, we will also make sure the hub gets some fees for monitoring and evaluation, and the angel network some administrative fees. That's an innovation we're testing out this year. It's called the ABAN AfriLabs Fund. And we're hopefully going to be launching that later in the year as one of the innovative responses to the funding challenge. Now, that leads me to Kingsley. Partnerships and collaboration. You've seen one go live right here. You've heard Jan talk about what ABAN and GIZ and others are doing. Do you want to expand for us your thoughts on the kind of partnerships that we really should be seeing?
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much. It's great to have heard everyone speak, and interesting that everyone has mentioned the fact that, what's lacking across the continent is key collaborations, and partnerships, so definitely, and I think you already pointed or alluded to some examples that could work or that are innovative in terms of being futuristic, like the one you referenced now with ABAN. And I think that's something interesting. That's something to look out for. I think that's something that should also be replicated in other parts of the continent, and that's, I think, it gives room for entrepreneurs themselves to begin to explore ways to innovate around partnerships, so that that ecosystem that we've all been mentioning can be created and can be expanded across the continent. So we talk a lot about, I saw a question in the group, in the chat, where someone's talking about a lot of investments coming from outside the continent. I think that's also something that we need to, of course, it's already happening. We need to amplify in terms of local investments, investments coming from within the continent itself. We need to explore that more. There's an example of, and you are one of the pioneers of, local investments here, at least in Nigeria and, West Africa and going across Africa. So I think that, there's need to explore an example of, so I'm sure you know about the Future Africa Fund. So those are key examples that have built upon what you started here, and that's pretty much a bunch of people coming together to look at startups within the continent that have promise and are funding them at, that early level, but beyond funding, we need to start to explore partnerships beyond, just financing. We need to talk about, because if we're talking about changing the African narrative, there's a whole lot more that goes into play beyond just funding. We need to talk about how do we position the move that the continent is going in, such that the rest of the world begins to see us, more than just, or the image that it, initially had. I think, you mentioned that before, where you said people still think of Africa as a dark continent, just stuck in the dark ages and things like that. So we also need to progress along these lines, where we talk about the impact that this ecosystem we've created is delivering for the continent, and how that is transforming the image of the continent and the perception that people have about the continent outside. There's a lot that's happening, and that's one of the reasons why I started my platform, which is pretty much just focused on the policy changing realities across the continent. I think that is key, and I think that that's work for everyone to do. I think that it's important that whatever it is that we're all working on for the continent, within the continent, we need to tell these stories. We need to amplify these actions, these activities that are occurring, so whether it's in support from the international community, whether it's wholly locally initiated and administered, we need to tell these stories more. We need to amplify it, and it's going to take everyone working together to make sure that we change the African narrative thoroughly.
Thank you very, very much for that, Kingsley. Right. I want to open this up to Q&A from the audience. And the first question that's come up is one that we've been dealing with for a while. And it's an interesting one. And it's on the nature, Well, I say, what makes an African founder? What exactly is an African founder is my question that underpins this. But the question that comes from the audience is this. The point about investment in African startup is well received. I'm curious of the speaker's perspective on the investments going into African startups led by white foreigners. 70% of 1 million plus investments in Kenya in 2018 went to startups with white founders. We can't dodge this topic. It is one that keeps recurring. It's been asked by the audience. So I'd like to get perspectives. I'm not going to call anybody's name. If you feel like you want to respond, please go ahead. I will have the final say on this. If there are no other questions, then we'll probably we will then hand over to the Honorable Minister to have a say. But I'd really like to hear from you all what you think about this, because it's a really sensitive matter, in my opinion, one that is peculiar to specific parts of the continent. But I'd like to hear anybody that wants to contribute. Please feel free.
Tomi, if I may.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I think I would say yes. I have the same impression, and I've been discussing the same question. Let's probably call it an issue under Marx, an issue on the African continent, because many of the funding that is coming in Africa is because I would say partially or at the larger percent, it's because there is a white funder who is part of the initiative. And Kenya is one of the beautiful examples of that. I don't know why this is happening, but I think most of the funders are more confident to give millions of dollars if they feel, I have the impression like they feel more secure, or their money is more secure on the continent if there is a white person who is part of the initiative. So that's my take, and I don't know why, but yeah.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and that's why I said it's peculiar to specific markets, because if I look at our experience in Nigeria, where we've got Flutterwave, we've got Paga, we've got Andela, we've got Hotels.ng, all in the $100 million to $300 million range, all with Nigerian founders, all with Nigerian angel investors starting, and all have raised money from Silicon Valley in the tens, if not the hundreds of millions of dollars. We've not had that experience of white founders being dominant in the investment base. That is sort of the context I wanted to give, is why is that happening specifically? Because there's no denying it's happening. The question is, why is it happening in particular geographies and not others? Lacina, you're shaking your head vigorously. Do you want to speak to this, please?
Thank you very much, brother. Yeah, it's quite interesting. There is no denial that it's existing, but it's not. We cannot really generalize it at this point to be able to conclude the trends, because I myself, originally from Cote d'Ivoire, I don't see the majority of founders here are local. And as you've seen also in Nigeria as well as Ghana. But this is not the first time for me to be hearing this. I've heard it before happening in Kenya or some part of the East African or Central Africa. I think it's very premature to jump to a conclusion to make up a trend out of this. However, if it is something which is happening, I think we need to know the root cause. Is the root cause lack of trust? Because all these millions of dollars pouring into Nigeria, to Nigerian founders, as well as even in West Africa, Senegal, Mali, we've seen that all the founders are local. And if it's happening, if something else is happening somewhere, I think it's worth looking at the root cause, and maybe by our next conference, I will be able to get some good answers after that. Thank you.
Thanks for that succinct answer. Well, unfortunately, we're going to have to cap it there, because I've been waiting anxiously, patiently, okay, because the last time we met was very, very brief. I would like for us all to welcome Her Excellency Paula Ingabire, the Minister of ICT and Innovation for Rwanda, who will give us the closing speech. Paula, good to see you again, and you're very welcome.
Thank you very much. Good to see you too as well. And greetings from Kigali. I think I've really enjoyed listening to, this well put together panel, just listening to the different perspectives, but also a lot of what they really, spoke to resonates with So for starters, I'm very honored to be, speaking to you, during this forum, addressing you, and also wanted to start off by, extending my thanks and gratitude to Professor Peter for inviting me to join the World Summits Awards Board of Directors, but also to take this opportunity to speak and have a conversation with you. The World Summits Award is really a unique platform which is giving opportunities to innovators and entrepreneurs from across the globe, people that are very enthusiastic about the use and adoption of technology in how we respond to some of the issues that we have. And there couldn't be a better time to be quite honest, to even have some of these conversations we are having today, especially knowing how much COVID-19 pandemic has not only shown the potential, but also the critical significance of digital innovations, connectivity in helping people to embrace the changing times and challenging times that we are in today. Digital inequality is particularly stacked when you look, when we just look at what we've been experiencing in our different jurisdictions, the learning losses that we've experienced, the need, to work remotely and also for businesses to stay afloat. But I think we still deal with a number of digital inequalities, from affordability, connectivity infrastructure, adoption and use. And I know many of you in your interventions spoke to some of the challenges that you're experiencing, which I'll really come back to, starting with finding the right team and partners to work with, challenges around access to financing. And I think when we talk about access to financing, we're looking at a whole range of financing instruments, from pre-seed to seed capital to growth capital, that is really required to scale from ideation to go to the market kind of innovations. And also interestingly, even looking at how certain countries are really, the financing gap is exacerbated by language issues. It was quite an eye-opening session for me as I listened to our colleague from DRC speaking to how they are not able to access financing because of the language issues. And then of course there's digital literacy. What I'd hoped to hear during this session is because we're talking about partnerships, we're talking about the need to unlock the right collaboration models that will drive adoption of these solutions. I was hoping to also hear around issues to do with having access to data. I know one of the panelists did speak to digital literacy being, the new currency, but I think data is the new currency. And if our innovators and our young entrepreneurs tech entrepreneurs are going to really solve issues that are so fundamental to our society, then they must be able to have access to data that gives them, a picture of what the extent and depth of issues that they're going to be dealing with. But I think all of that, when we look at all the challenges that have really been raised, it's really a good opportunity to start to think around the entire ecosystem. And I think Jan did speak to the ecosystem effort. Once we've bucketed all these challenges, who is better placed within the ecosystem players and stakeholders to respond and address to some of these issues? The bigger issue, of course, that we're all going to be grappling with on Africa very particularly is mindset. I did hear some of you speak to the need for, the perception of the continent, but I think it also starts from within. It's a question of understanding, how do we perceive ourselves as a starting point? It's not how the world looks in on us, but it's also how we perceive ourselves. Do we think we have the skills? Do we think we have what it takes to really create the right solutions? Because we're better placed to understand our challenges more than anyone. But let me go back to just speaking to a couple of things, starting with this whole ecosystem effort. I think in many ways there has to be a community approach to problem solving. And why do I say this? The challenges, let's say, just take an example of how education has been impacted greatly by COVID-19. I don't think the situation in Rwanda is any different from what's happening in Lagos or Togo, in Ghana, anywhere. So if we're then thinking about what challenges are we facing today and how are we rallying those partnerships that are needed, if you unlock it in one jurisdiction, most likely with very little proof that it's going to really work in another jurisdiction. And I think platforms like WSA are very good because they allow us to share experiences. We don't have to reinvent the wheel for many of the challenges that we're facing. I mean, we talk about a pandemic, it's really a global challenge. We talk about the UN SDGs, their global goals. But for us to respond to whether it's the current global challenge that we are all grappling with, or to achieve the global SDGs that we are all working so hard to respond to as we bridge the gaps that we have, is going to require these kind of global partnerships and collaboration happening. And so, why do I bring that up? I think I've had, and I wanted to speak very particularly to the issue around language, local language. In many ways, I think the solutions that we're trying to create should have a global outfit, because the challenges are not unique to a particular jurisdiction. What is different is how do you make sure that these challenges or these global solutions that are being put in place are adapting to a local context. And local context may mean language, may mean the levels of digital literacy, the levels of device penetration. What I've seen, take an example of the Uber. You have so many countries from the developed world to the developing world that is already using the Uber system when we talk about shared mobility. But in certain cases, they will accept cash because that's the mode of payment that is available in that economy. In other places, it's going to be their cards. So I think it's how do you think about these global solutions and adapt them to the local context, which is really important as we drive change, as we think about how digital technologies can be used, can be leveraged to respond to these issues. The other thing I wanted to point out is around market creating innovations. When we talk about inclusion, I think at the heart of inclusion, of equity, is really understanding that if you are a tech entrepreneur, an innovator that's developing a solution, you're not just targeting a very small percentage of the citizens of any jurisdiction, but you're constantly thinking about what does it take to pick this large group of non-consumers that could benefit from using this technology to really start using it. Is it a tweak in how the technology is delivered? Is it a tweak in pricing? And I think that will already allow us to understand why are some of these non-consumers not using my product, and what do I need to do differently for them to be, consumers of the product or service that I'm providing. And this is very important because then you're thinking about inclusion. You're not just targeting the people who can afford to use your services. And then the final point that I wanted to raise, maybe last two, one is around, as I listen to challenges around financing, I think one of the things that we also need to, embrace is a risk-taking culture, is really embracing failure and celebrating failure. I think this is it's not unique to particular countries. It's across the board. And when you hear about the challenge of angel investors not being enough, or some, I think when you look at the different innovation labs we have, a lot of them are co-working spaces with a bit of mentorship, access to market, but very limited financing in terms of pre-seed and seed capital. Yet, the majority of the innovators that we have in these innovation hubs are people in the youth bracket. So chances are that they do not have the right collateral to put to some of our financing institutions to access the right kind of financing. So any form of grant is really what is going to unlock these ideas to the next level. So if this risk-taking culture, we really need to find ways of navigating it. And I wanted to share an example because we in Rwanda, we faced that issue, particularly where you will have a lot of growth capital coming in, but we don't have enough pre-seed and seed financing that is really needed to create the pipeline that is going to tap into the venture capital money flows that are coming into the country. So what we've done is to invent what we've called procurement for public procurement for innovation. And many governments will relate with this because public sector globally, will have very, systematic rules and procedures of procuring services and goods. Many times we're looking for tested and tried solutions. And so the model that we're trying to pilot here is to say, can we carve out a certain percentage of our, budget and decide on procuring not necessarily tested and tried products elsewhere, but new to the world innovations, and structure something that allows us to give the startups within the economy a level playing field. Because if we don't trust them and allow them to test on us some of their innovations, then most likely scalability is really nothing they can really look forward to in the very near future. And finally, I think what I'm also looking at is the aspect of co-creation. When you think about co-creation, if government has data, can we open it up to these young innovators? Because what you don't want is many innovators that are trying to create the similar ride-sharing models. That's just an example I'm giving, but rather understanding what is the issue around mobility in a particular city, in a particular community. Is ride sharing the only solution that a whole bunch of entrepreneurs and innovators should be squeezed into trying to solve, or are there other challenges? And they will never know until we open up this data, until we sort of like share here as some of the things at a policy level that we are trying to unlock. And then from an innovator perspective, they start to think, what is it that we can do to create some of these solutions? They'll bring the expertise, we'll look for someone to bring the money. And I like the challenge that has really been put up, because I think when it comes to this early stage financing, whether it's governments, whether it's development partners, I think this is where we should be playing best, because no one else will be able to build the pipeline that we require if we're not putting some skin in the game. So that was just a bit of what I wanted to share on some of my, thoughts, just listening to the panel, which really, I think just already shows that there's a very good understanding of the challenges we have. And I think the next step is, now that we understand them very well, how are we joining efforts to ensure that we, are addressing them, but also we're able to churn out as many, startups as possible. I think there was one thing we did talk about. Make IT, the DG of Smart Africa spoke to some of the things they're doing, Startup Act that is being done in Tunisia and Rwanda. One thing, and I know GIZ may not be here, but I think it just struck me that at the back of all these initiatives, GIZ has been a great partner in really unlocking these opportunities, thinking about how to support. They're here. That's very good. So I just wanted to thank them, because just looking at some of the initiatives that they're taking on, even for Rwanda, as we think about the Startup Act, they're a very instrumental player in helping us understand what kind of incentives and environment do we need to create to scale startups. So without taking much time, I wanted to thank everyone for their time, and looking forward to seeing how we can continue to work together to really unlock these opportunities that we've all been speaking about. Thank you very much.
Wow, Paula, thanks a lot for that. And I think the takeaway for us is data-driven decision-making is the way forward if we want to go from quality to excellence. I'd like to thank everybody that has participated today. I really, really appreciate the time spent, the quality discussions. And now I will hand over to Nora, who has a short announcement to make before we all disappear.